So audits and inspection, audits and inspections are one of those things, element 18, that for some people bring a really negative thought to. And having been, I will say, on both sides of what we would call both sides of the fence, being an auditor and also being audited, it's one of those things that I understand both parts. So I believe in what's called integrated audits. And that means that I don't believe that it's just somebody with a checklist going out and doing an audit and that's good to go. There's a part of the program, your overall audit program, that's necessary, but a really great audit program also includes everyone. So, if you start out at the front line, those who actually do the work, how do you incorporate them in an audit program? So do they have, a checklist that they go out and they look at things that should be in place? Do we have enough alcohol hand sanitizer to be able to refill stations? Are all the batteries charged up for, a piece of equipment? Have they been maintained? Do we have enough masks? How are we doing those internal audits and having the front line? Then we move up to the walk around, supervisors doing, audits, scheduled audits, and how do they fit in to the program? I see them as such a critical piece of really maintaining on so many different elements here, that continuous improvement, training and education. I believe that if you set your audits up in such a way that they can educate people as well, that you really have developed a critical audit. Third-party audits are another aspect. If you really want to have your program looked at, have colleagues that are in similar facilities come and walk through. Have a different department look at different departments. You may have a third-party auditing team that comes in already for different things and have them also look at things associated with your STAR program. You can have a GBAC STAR audit done. If that's in the future when we can travel again, that may be something that you want. And also, how do you feed the information in an audit report back up to leadership? Because, I try and to let folks know if leadership isn't aware that you're struggling in something, that maybe the equipment that you use is outdated or is broken, they can't help you to get that changed. And so you really need to have an audit program that is full circle, the whole quality management program of plan, of doing, of checking, I like to say study, and then acting upon. So that PDCA, that whole cycle of management systems approach. Again, the control of your suppliers. This could be, your suppliers of where you purchase equipment, solutions from. It can be your service providers. How do you review their involvement with your program? What is your program for review? And how are you looking at your contingency plans associated with your services, with your cleaners, and again, disinfectant tools and equipment? Element 20, document management. The last element, but not, in any way, shape, or form the least important. I worked for many years in the pharmaceutical industry, and we were taught that if it wasn't documented, it wasn't done. And as a compliance officer and responsible for environmental health and safety for many, many years, I would have people come to me and, there was no documentation that something got done. And we knew that, if an auditor had come in, an OSHA auditor, an EPA auditor, that they're going to look for the documentation. And what I tried to remind people is, it's not that I'm questioning you as an individual, if there was somebody who reported to me that you did it. But the fact of the matter is, something that we need to think about is that if it wasn't documented, in an auditor's mind, it wasn't done. And so if it's required that, let's say, I remember one time, it was an environmental issue, and the requirement legally was that you had to do a review of your storage facility for hazardous waste on a weekly basis, and you had to document it. And, the documentation is basically, what is your checklist? And have you gone through the checklist and then signed and dated that it was completed? And they didn't do it. And when we were actually in the midst of an audit, and I'm looking at this, and it's like, we were auditing them, and it's like, listen, it's not to say that I don't believe that you walked through and looked at these, but I need to be able to show, because if you're not here and we actually had an external person come in, an EPA auditor, then there's no way that I can verify that it was done. And so documentation management and things like that are really important. It does not have to be complicated. You can do this simply. Sometimes it's just a simple checklist and sign and date. Sometimes it may be a sticker. Think about an eye wash station where they're having to flush it, and they sign and date that it's been flushed on a periodic basis. The other part is your SOPs. If someone shows me an SOP and the date of creation was 10 years ago, that to me is not a current document. So think about how you're going to review your documents. I'll give you an example. On safety documents, there are some that require an annual review. In the United States, the Bloodborne Pathogens Program requires that you have what's called a exposure control plan, and that exposure control plan is required to be reviewed annually. There are others that will say periodic, and so set a cycle that is acceptable to you. In the past, what I would do is, unless required by a regulatory body, a frequency was required, we would set that it at least needed to be reviewed on a 2-year cycle. We shot for every year, but we at least ensured that we reviewed all of our written documents, our written SOPs, our plans on a 2-year cycle. So think about how you're going to do your standard operating procedures. Are you going to review them annually? Are you going to review them every 2 years? How are you going to document that? And how are you going to ensure that that gets done?